So today we're going to pick up with the roots of evolutionism. And before we get started, I want to encourage you with these words of Scripture out of 1 Timothy chapter 4. The Spirit clearly says that in later times, some will abandon the faith, follow deceiving spirits, and the things taught by demons. Such teachings come through hypocritical liars whose conscience have been seared as with a hot iron. I want to touch base just a little bit before we get into the meat of some of this, because what I'm going to read from is a book called Isis Unveiled by HP Blavatsky. When I was talking about the roots of evolutionism in a previous episode, evolutionism, secular humanism, all come down to just a few individuals. And this book called Isis Unveiled is I don't know, it's like a game plan, but I believe from the enemy. Isis Unveiled is the root source of information for modern-day New Ageism, secular humanity. Auguste Comte is one of the guys we're going to talk about here in just a moment. Talks about the religion of humanity, which grew up very fast and then died very fast. Was big in France, Germany, England, some in America, some in Brazil. And here's the gist of what's happening. In the book Isis Unveiled, and I'm going to summarize a lot of this, but you can check it out if you want to. I do caution you that this is enemy intelligence, and so be very grounded in your faith before you go digging into this stuff called Isis Unveiled. But starting on page 67, this gentleman by the name of Auguste Comte, C-O-M-T-E, he was studying at a engineering school in France, and he woke up one day basically saying, "I'm going to be a prophet." And it was really quick that the things that he taught, caught on quite a bit, but nobody was willing to pay him for it. And so what happens here, and this is on page 67 of Isis Unveiled, says that the philosopher mathematician, the high priest of the religion of the future, taught his doctrine as do all of his brother prophets of our modern days. He deified woman, he furnished her with an altar, but the goddess had to pay for its use. The rationalists had laughed at such an aberration of Fourier, and they had laughed at the St. Simonists, and they scorned their scorn for spiritualism knew no bounds. The same rationalists and materialists were caught like so many empty-headed sparrows by the birdlime of the new prophet's rhetoric. And longing for some kind of divinity, a craving for the unknown, is a feeling in man. And hence the worst atheists don't even seem to be exempt from it. We're going to skip over here a little bit to page 68. Let us see in what degree Kant's boasted religion of the future is superior to spiritualism. I'll pause here for just a moment. Spiritualism comes out of the 1850s, early 1900s, when there were supernatural manifestations of spirit beings. If you think of seances and things like that, that is the root of spiritualism and where it comes from. So this idea of what is a religion that is superior to spiritualism, and as they're digging into this and they're laying the basic ideas for this, Auguste Comte comes up with some of these very key ideas. Kant has fulsomely depicted the artificially fecundated woman of the future, but she is an elder sister to the Cyprian ideal of the free lovers. Immunity against the future offered by the teaching of these moonstruck disciples have inoculated some of these pseudo-spiritualists as to the extent to lead them into the form of communistic associations. Kant was a mathematician, cleverly combining several old utopias. He colored the whole, trying to improve on Plato's idea. He materialized it, and he presented the world with the greatest monstrosity that ever emanated from the human mind. Now, we beg the reader to keep in view that we do not attack Kant as a philosopher, but as a professed reformer. In the irremediate darkness of his political, philosophical, and religious views, we are often met with observations and remarks in which profound logic and the judiciousness of the thought rival the brilliancies of their interpretation. In other words, the things that Kant taught sounds like, oh man, this is really good, but then when you start thinking about it, holy cow, there's a whole lot of crazy in it. Kant came up with this idea then called positivism. And here's what positivism did. This is on page 69. In one of his volumes, and we're going to talk about the Catechism of the Religion of Positivism, any idea suggestive of even provisional remedies for such evils, his disciples suggest that the sublime doctrines of their prophet were not intended for the common people. Comparing the dogmas preached by positivism with their practical exemplification and its apostles, we must confess the possibility of some very achromatic doctrine being at the bottom of it. Here it is. While the high priest teaches that woman must cease to be the female of the man, while the theory of positivist legislatures of marriage and the family chiefly consists of making the woman the mere companion of the man by ridding her of every maternal function. I want to pause here for just a moment because there is a link here between page 69 of Isis Unveiled and going back now to 1 Timothy chapter 4. 1 Timothy chapter 4 verse 3 reads this: They forbid people to marry and order them to abstain from certain foods, which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and who know the truth. This whole idea that Kant is trying to push is that the female is not part of the male, that it does not, it's contrary to the scripture teaching that woman came from man, and also the idea then that woman has to be stripped of every maternal instinct. And when you take a look at some of the doctrines of men today, or I would even go as far to say doctrines of demons, we are seeing that same pattern being established. That in our search for equality, we are erasing the line between male and female. This is something very important because once you erase the line of male and female, there's now no reason for marriage. And when there's no reason for marriage, there's no reason for God to be part of the relationships. And if there's no part of God to be part of the relationships, then we can start stripping God systematically out of every cultural construct. Now, here's the things that were conclusions of what Kant taught. This is what is written on page 69. This is where Isis Unveiled, HP Blavatsky picks back up. This is what he wrote in 1859. Kant not only thought that he found the principles and traced these outlines and furnished the method, but he had also deduced the consequences and constructed the social and religious edifice of the future. And it is in the second division that we make our reservations, declaring that at the same time we accept these things as an inheritance, but also the whole of the first. And so what goes on here in H.P. Blavatsky's Isis Unveiled is that they start taking the things that Auguste Comte, and that's C-O-M-P-T-E, wrote about, and started coming up with just exactly how these things affected the culture. And so let's pause here for just a few moments because we've gone on for quite a bit, and we'll pick up a little bit more in the next episode, which will be part 2 of this mini-series on the roots of evolutionism.